My name is Eleanor Hayes, and I am 68 years old. I live alone in a quiet town in Vermont, where the winters are long and the nights feel even longer. I thought I had learned to live with silence, but that afternoon, standing at the arrivals gate in Los Angeles, I realized silence can still split you in half. I held my suitcase by the handle coat, folded neatly over my arm, and kept my chin high so I wouldn't look like someone who had been forgotten. All around me, families were rushing into each other's arms, husbands kissing wives, grandchildren squealing for their grandparents, balloons bobbing in the air. I stood still, waiting for my turn, waiting for my son, Daniel, and his wife, Clara, to spot me. I had replayed that moment in my mind for 3 days ever since they called and said, "Fly out, Mom. It won't be the same without you." I had believed them. 40 minutes passed. The crowd thinned. My phone stayed quiet. I told myself they were running late, caught in holiday traffic, maybe keeping the kids calm in the car. But then my phone buzzed. Not a call, not even a message, just a social media notification. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. There they were. Daniel in the sweater I mailed last Christmas, Clara with her polished smile, the children crowded around a long wooden table covered with turkey stuffing and a pie that wasn't mine. The caption read, "Full house, full hearts. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." My chest went tight. I searched the photo twice, maybe 3 times, as if I might find a space for me tucked in a corner. There was none. They hadn't been stuck in traffic. They hadn't been on their way. They were already gathered without me smiling into the lens of someone else's camera. I didn't cry. Not there, not in front of strangers. I slipped my coat on, pulled the handle of my suitcase, and walked past the taxi line out into the November air. The only thing I knew for certain was this: I would not stand here waiting for people who had no intention of coming. 3 days earlier, the phone rang while I was folding laundry in my small kitchen. Daniel's name lit up the screen, and I hesitated before answering. My son doesn't usually call unless there's a reason, an overdue bill, a birthday reminder, or something he needs. But his voice that afternoon was unusually warm, almost syrupy. "Mom, what are you doing for Thanksgiving?" he asked. I told him the truth. I planned to stay home, roast a small chicken, maybe bake a pie if my hands didn't ache too badly. I would have the radio on, watch an old movie, and let the day pass quietly. There was a pause, like he was calculating something. Then he said, "The kids were asking about you. We'd really love for you to come out here this year. It wouldn't feel right without you." Those words, "it wouldn't feel right without you," cut right through me. It had been so long since anyone made me feel wanted instead of just needed, and I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that maybe this holiday would be different. So I said yes. Daniel didn't offer to book the flight or cover the cost, but I didn't ask. I went to the drawer where I kept an envelope of money tucked away for emergencies. I decided this was one. That evening, I booked the ticket myself, a non-stop flight to Los Angeles, even paid the extra $12 for more legroom. A small luxury, but it made me feel like I belonged. The next day, I went shopping. I bought books for the kids, a box of chocolates Clara used to enjoy, and a new cardigan for myself, navy blue and soft against the skin. It was silly, maybe, but I wanted to look like someone you invite into the family picture. I packed early, checked the weather, and told no one. Hope has a way of making you superstitious. The airport was crowded when my plane touched down in Los Angeles. Families streamed through the terminal with rolling bags and paper cups of coffee, voices raised in excitement. I smoothed down my skirt, brushed crumbs off my lap, and slipped on my black shoes, with the small heel, the ones I kept for special occasions. I wanted to look ready, like someone worth meeting. At the baggage claim, I wheeled my suitcase to the exit and stood beneath the large arrival sign, Gate 4B. I told myself I'd see Daniel's familiar face any second now, Clara behind him with her polished smile, the kids waving their arms. My coat rested over my arm, neat and steady, because I refused to look like a woman who'd been left behind. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I checked the flight status twice, confirming it had landed on time. My phone stayed quiet, No message, no missed call. Strangers all around me were being swept into hugs, lifted off their feet, greeted with tears and laughter. I kept standing as still as a suitcase on the curb. At 30 minutes, my phone buzzed. My heart leapt, but it wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Clara. Just a notification. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The photo filled my screen. Daniel seated at the head of a long table. The sweater I sent him last Christmas stretched across his shoulders. Clara leaned into him, smiling wide. Their children plates piled high, eyes lit by candlelight. A golden turkey at the center, a pie that was not mine at the edge. The caption, "Full house, full hearts. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." I read it twice, then again. My throat went dry. There was no seat for me in that picture. They weren't late. They weren't coming. I slipped on my coat, pulled my suitcase handle, and walked out past the taxi line into the cold November air. The pavement outside the terminal stretched wide and gray, dotted with buses and taxis that weren't meant for me. The air carried that California chill that creeps under your collar, sharper than I remembered. I pulled my suitcase along the sidewalk, its small wheels rattling over cracks in the concrete. Every few steps, another family passed by, laughter spilling out as they loaded into cars that knew their names. I slowed near a bench, my knees protesting, but I didn't sit. Sitting would have felt like surrender. I wanted to keep moving, even if I didn't know where I was headed. A young woman in a puffy jacket rushed past, carrying 2 paper cups of hot chocolate. She stopped by the curb where an older woman waited. "Here, Mom," she said, handing her one. The two hugged briefly, easily, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That tiny gesture landed heavy in my chest. I tried calling Daniel, then one last attempt. The call rang out unanswered. I left a message voice, steady though my stomach twisted. "I've landed. I'm outside door B under the sign with the airplane. Hope everything's okay. I'll wait a little longer." Even as I spoke, I knew waiting was useless. By the time I hung up, my hands were stiff with cold, my heart heavier than my suitcase. I walked past the shuttle signs, past the car rental return until the lights of the terminal faded behind me. That's when I saw it. A squat building with a flickering neon sign, Tilly's Diner. The eye in Tilly sputtered in and out, glowing pink against the fogged windows. Paper turkeys were taped to the glass edges, curling from the steam inside. I paused on the sidewalk, staring. My suitcase handle pressed into my palm. I could have turned back, but instead, I pushed the door open. A bell jingled above me, and the smell of hot grease and cinnamon rolled out like an invitation. Inside the diner, the light was warm and slightly yellow, the kind that made the cracked vinyl booths look softer than they were. A waitress with a short ponytail looked up from behind the counter and smiled. "Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart," she said, as if I had always belonged there. "Same to you," I managed, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. She handed me a menu, though it was clear the kitchen wasn't running at full steam. "We've got turkey and pie left," she added. "Pie sounds good," I said. "What kind, pumpkin pecan or key lime?" "Pumpkin. And tea, please." "You got it." I slid into a booth near the window, setting my suitcase beside me like an obedient dog. My coat lay across the seat, and for the first time all day, I allowed myself to exhale. Through the fogged glass, I could still see the blur of headlights on the road, strangers coming and going to families that wanted them. The waitress brought my order quickly. The slice of pumpkin pie leaned slightly to one side, topped with a dollop of whipped cream that melted before my eyes. The tea steamed dark and bitter the way I preferred it. I took a bite, then another. It was the best pie I had eaten in years, not because of the crust or the spices, but because it was mine. A bite not made for someone else, not baked with the hope of pleasing anyone. Just mine. I pulled out my small notebook, the one where I usually wrote grocery lists, and opened to a blank page. The words came without hesitation. I am not spare. I am not extra. I am not a side dish at someone else's table. I underlined it twice. My hand shook not from weakness, but from clarity. For the first time in years, I felt like I was writing myself back into existence. The November air hit harder when I stepped back outside. The neon sign buzzed faintly behind me as I pulled my coat tighter and wheeled my suitcase down the sidewalk. I didn't have a plan, only the certainty that I wasn't going back to the airport to wait for a ride that would never come. A half-mile from the diner, I spotted a low building with a peeling sign that read, "Maple Lodge Motel Weekly Rates Available." The paint was beige and chipped, the kind of place most people avoided unless they had no choice. But the lights were on, and that was enough. Inside the lobby, a man behind the counter watched a football game on a small television. He barely looked up when I asked for a single room. "ID and card," he said, voice flat. I handed them over, and within minutes, I was walking down a concrete hallway toward room 112. The room was exactly what I expected. 2 mismatched lamps, a faded bedspread patterned with dull browns, and a heater that hummed loudly, but worked. I set my suitcase against the wall and sat on the edge of the bed. My good shoes pinched from all the walking, and my cardigan still carried the scent of the diner. I finally turned my phone over. 3 missed calls from Daniel, 2 from Clara, a single text, "Mom, where are you?" No apology, no explanation, just confusion as if I were the one who had forgotten them. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my notebook again and wrote slowly, carefully, "Love without respect isn't love." I stared at the sentence until the words blurred, then underlined it. The heater rattled, the walls smelled faintly of bleach, and the ceiling had a thin crack running above the bed. But I felt something steady inside me. For the first time that day, I wasn't waiting. I was deciding. By the time I returned home to Vermont, the frost had settled across the fields. The quiet of my little house wrapped around me like a blanket, but I didn't let myself sink into it. The very next morning, I drove into town, the old tires of my car crunching across icy gravel, and parked in front of the brick building that housed my bank. Inside, the air smelled faintly of printer ink and disinfectant. A young teller with kind eyes greeted me with the kind of politeness people reserve for the elderly. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes. How can we help you today? I'd like to speak with someone about my accounts," I said. All of them. Within minutes, I was sitting in a glass-walled office across from a woman named Natalie, who introduced herself as an account manager. She looked younger than my own daughter-in-law, with a neat blazer and a voice that carried both confidence and caution. "What can I do for you today, Mrs. Hayes?" I folded my hands, steady. "I want to suspend all automatic transfers to family members, effective immediately." Her eyebrows lifted as she scrolled through the screen. That would include tuition payments, car insurance, and several monthly deposits labeled Daniel Hayes, yes, I said. Every one of them. She hesitated as if waiting for me to explain. I didn't. For once in my life, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. "All right," she said finally. "We can stop those transfers today. Good. And while we're at it, revoke the power of attorney under his name." Natalie blinked, but didn't question me. She printed a form, slid it across the desk, and I signed with a firm hand. When I left the bank, the frost on the steps had already begun to melt. I walked slowly, deliberately, carrying with me a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was mine. The next morning, I parked outside a small 2-story office with green shutters and a brass plaque that read, "Carver and Associates Attorneys at Law." I had been here many times before when my husband passed, when we settled the house, when I first drafted a will over 15 years ago. The building smelled the same as it always had, like old paper and polished wood. Mr. Carver rose from behind his desk when I entered. His hair had gone white since the last time I saw him, but his handshake was just as steady. "Mrs. Hayes," he said warmly, "what can I do for you today?" I sat down across from him, folding my hands in my lap. "I want to make changes to my estate, significant ones." He adjusted his glasses. "Go on. I want everything, my home, my savings, my pension, every asset to move into a trust. And I want my granddaughter, Lily Carter, to be the sole beneficiary." Mr. Carver studied me carefully. "So you'd like to remove your son and his wife?" "Yes," I said, my voice clear. "They've had enough from me. More than enough. This time I want to ensure everything I've worked for goes to someone who has shown me real care." He nodded slowly, pulling out a legal pad. Lily's a good young woman, always struck me as thoughtful. She is, I said, my throat tightening. She's the only one who calls without asking for something. The only one who remembers me as a person, not a bank account. Mr. Carver didn't press for more. Instead, he began drafting notes, his pen scratching across the page. We went line by line, house accounts, retirement funds, until every detail was accounted for. By the time I signed the preliminary documents, my chest felt lighter. Not triumphant, not bitter, just certain. For once, the future was in my hands. That evening, the phone rang while I was rinsing a teacup at the sink. For a moment, I almost didn't answer, half expecting Daniel's number again, ready to drag me back into explanations I no longer owed. But when I saw the name, my heart caught in my chest. Lily, Grandma. Her voice was warm, nervous, almost breathless. "Sweetheart," I said, my throat tightening. "I didn't expect to hear from you tonight." "I got your letter," she whispered. "The one you mailed. Dad told me you canceled your flight. He made it sound like you just changed your mind. But then I read your words, and Grandma, were you really there? Did you actually land?" I closed my eyes. Yes, I was there. I stood at the airport and waited. I saw the photos. There was silence on the line, then the sound of her breath catching. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "I had no idea." "I know, darling. That wasn't yours to carry." "I missed you," she said quickly. "It didn't feel right without you at the table." For the first time since that day, tears pricked my eyes. Not the hot sting of humiliation, but the softer kind that comes when someone finally sees you. "That means more than you know," I whispered. "Can I come visit?" she asked. "I've got a break from classes next weekend. I'll take the train." I pressed a hand to the counter, steadying myself. "Of course. The guest room is ready." Her laugh was small but real. "I'll bring the chessboard. You still play? I never stopped." When we hung up, I stayed at the sink for a long moment, the phone still in my hand. For once, the silence in my house didn't feel hollow. It felt full. Saturday arrived gray and cold, the kind of morning that carries both dread and promise. I bundled myself in my warmest coat and drove to the train station in town, clutching a paper bag with a sandwich and an apple inside, just in case she had forgotten to eat on the ride. When the train finally rolled in, brakes screeching, I searched the crowd of passengers until I saw her. Lily stepped off in an oversized hoodie and jeans, her dark curls tucked beneath a knit beanie, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She looked older than I remembered, sharper somehow, but when her eyes found mine, her entire face lit up. "Grandma," she called, rushing forward. I barely had time to open my arms before she was hugging me tight and real the way I had ached for. "Hi, Grandma," she whispered into my shoulder. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, breathing her in like air after too long underwater. "You're here." We drove home slowly, the streets familiar yet different with her beside me. She looked out the window as if trying to memorize every corner again. At the house, she dropped her bag in the guest room and padded back to the kitchen like she belonged there. I brewed tea while she curled up in the corner of the couch, legs tucked under her, just as she used to as a little girl. On the coffee table sat the chessboard I had pulled from the closet. "Still up for a game?" I asked. She grinned. "Always." We played 2 rounds. She won the first, I the second. Laughter filled the quiet spaces where loneliness had once lived. Later, we cooked dinner together, simple pasta with garlic and spinach. She stirred the pot while I grated cheese, talking about her classes, her cat, the little frustrations and joys of her life. That night, as we sipped tea side by side, I realized something healing didn't need a crowd. Sometimes it only took one person who truly saw you. It was late Friday afternoon when I heard the knock at the door. 3 slow raps, hesitant, not the confident rhythm of a neighbor or the casual thud of the mailman. I opened it to find Clara standing on my porch. Her hair was pinned perfectly too perfect for the cold wind outside, and she carried a leather tote slung over one shoulder. Her smile was polished, but her eyes restless. "Eleanor," she said, voice soft, rehearsed. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting her in. She glanced around the living room as though she expected to find dust or neglect. Everything looked the same as always, but something in the air had shifted, and I knew she could sense it. She sat down only after I did, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "This whole thing has been a misunderstanding," she began. "Daniel thought your flight was the next day. That's why no one was at the airport. And the photo I asked quietly." Her eyes flickered down. "That was just something I posted for the holiday. I didn't mean to hurt you, but you did." She straightened, her tone tightening. "Well, yes, but what matters now is moving past it. The kids miss you. Daniel's been calling. We're all concerned you've shut us out." I took a breath, slow and deliberate. "No, I haven't shut you out. I just stopped filling the silence for you. There's a difference." For the first time, her composure cracked. "Does Daniel know you've made changes?" she asked. "I imagine he's starting to suspect," I said calmly. Her lips pressed thin. "This isn't like you." I met her gaze steady. "It's like me now." She gathered her tote, rising stiffly. At the doorway, she said, "Daniel really is worried." "He should be," I answered. "Not because I'm gone, but because I'm not coming back." The door closed with a soft click, and the silence that followed belonged entirely to me. The phone rang the next evening, Daniel's name flashing across the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something inside me told me to answer, if only to close the door myself. "Mom." His voice cracked, thinner than I remembered. "I've been trying to reach you. We're worried." I sat at the kitchen table, the poinsettia lily had brought still blooming in the center. "I know," I said calmly. "There's been confusion mistakes." "Clara posted that photo too soon, and we thought Daniel," I interrupted gently. "Stop." The silence stretched long. "I don't understand," he finally said. "After everything we've done, why are you shutting us out?" I let the words settle. Then I said, "No, Daniel. After everything I've done. The loans, the tuition, the birthdays you forgot, but I never did. And still I was the one left standing at the curb with a suitcase in my hand." His breath caught on the line. "You're punishing us." "No," I said evenly. "I'm releasing myself. From obligations you never respected, from the guilt I carried too long. You'll go on with your life, and so will I, but don't mistake this. I was your family. You haven't been mine in a very long time. There was nothing left to add." I ended the call, placed the phone face down on the table, and felt a stillness I hadn't known in years. Later that night, I slipped a small package into the mail for Lily, a pair of silver earrings I had saved along with a note. "These are yours. Not because you asked, but because you showed up. You are never invisible in this house." When the first snow of December fell, I lit 2 candles on my kitchen table. Not for company, not for ceremony, but for myself. I looked at the glow and whispered, steady and certain, "I'm still here." And I was. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.